Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Soul School. I was going to say, Jeff, you're on the wrong side of the of
I thought
the.
the same thing. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so you've got your tree up and your piano, and you're in the house, and that's awesome. So you're warm,
Hmm.
and we have our tree up too. So that's awesome too. I forgot to turn my phone off. Oh my gosh, I'm telling you, I'm losing it. I really am even not even prepared. Okay. So,
It's okay. I
so
thought I would flip the computer around tonight from where I'm normally seated and give a little festive view. So since we're coming into that season,
yes, well, everyone will forgive me, right? Everyone will forgive me that I'm just being Annie and, these things happen and I was not quite prepared for tonight because stuff's going on, like lots of stuff. So let me get my drink and everybody can see my owl. I have my owl shirt on that I just love, my owl shirt. So hold on, don't leave. I got my drink. I have to have my drink. There we go.
all right.
Okay, now I'm ready. Now
Cheers.
cheers. Orange juice. Well, orange tangerine juice, I think. I'll tell you in a sec.
French roast coffee.
Ah.
Hmm.
Oh, well, I just had French roast coffee like an hour ago. So now I've graduated to orange, I think orange tangerine.
Nice.
So
Very refreshing.
oh. Okay, so here's Bill filling in for us here saying class is now officially in session. In other words, like everybody's out there watching and you haven't said classes in session yet. Okay, so it is. And as we've learned in recent weeks and months, class is an ongoing 24/7 asleep awake thing.
Hmm.
I had a dream the other night that was so intense and so disturbing that when I woke up, I had to reach out to the person who was in it immediately and say, immediately, are you okay? And that rarely happens to me. But when it does, I listen to it. And I couldn't tell if it was a stress dream, which I think that it probably was. Just dealing with what I'm dealing with here, and that getting all gobbledygooked up into my consciousness and then playing itself out during my sleep, which comes very sporadically and usually no more than about 2 hours at a time. Um, so yeah, I don't know. This has been, and you and I have been in touch frequently in the last few weeks, particularly because the universe is speaking to us through numbers.
Hmm.
And we've talked about it on the show before. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from people who are our viewers, our friends, our extended family. And they're all saying the same thing. It's happening to them as well.
Hmm.
Um, and nobody understands it. We don't understand it, but you had some thoughts this week that you shared with me that I think are pertinent and that would be helpful, to others who are having the same experience. So if you would like to share what you shared with me with our friends, please feel free to run with it. And if you say something that triggers me, I'll hop in and comment accordingly.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, there's a lot of directions you could go when it comes to the whole numbers phenomenon. There is something that's been really, there's so we talked last week. We titled last week "The Re-Enchanted World," right?
Yes.
And we talked about it. We continued it into a world awakening because I forgot we did 2 hours last week. It seemed like an hour.
I
Actually, it seemed
know.
like
It
half
didn't
an
even seem like an hour. It
hour.
seemed
No,
like 15 minutes and it
yeah,
was
for
over.
sure. I do live streams and podcasts sometimes, and they feel like a chore, but this one always flies by. By the time it's done, I'm like, come on, we were just getting started.
Yeah.
But we talked a little bit about the re-enchanted world last week, and we talked
Mhm.
about the process um, of original enchantment, how we're born just being enchanted by the world because really it's all we can be. We've known nothing else but wonder and awe because we've known nothing else. And so we're constantly surprised because we've never experienced anything, right? And then we become disenchanted at some point, whether it's in literal adolescence or a more metaphorical adolescence. We become disenchanted by the things we were once enchanted by. And
Yeah.
we go through seasons where we kind of lose that sense of wonder and awe concerning the world that used to leave us in wonder and awestruck. And then there's an opportunity that comes later in life, and it comes multiple times. It's not just one experience. We experience this multiple times and on multiple levels. But I think there is one maybe larger experience that does kind of define the whole of our lives. That's more of a macro experience, but where we have an opportunity to re-enter into the world as though it were enchanted, but this time bereft of the baggage of a naivete we couldn't help but bear because it's all we could bear, because it's all we had. And so we re-enter in. David Bentley Hart, who's one of my favorite theologians, probably one of the most brilliant, I think, theologians in the field right now, says that wisdom is the recovery of innocence at the far end of experience. That wisdom is the recovery of innocence at the far end of experience. That wisdom is what happens when you recover the innocence and naivete of childhood after a lifetime of experience. So you're no longer truly naive, but there's a sense in which you choose to enter into almost a performed naivete, where you choose to take it on as a posture towards reality. And when you do that, reality presents itself to you as a wonderful thing, because it is. And were you going to say something? Yeah, go
What
ahead.
you just described, what you just exactly described, was the process that I had to go through in order to write House of Darkness, House of Light.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
That's why it's not written in first person.
Mm.
It's not a first person narrative. I am the narrator. I'm one of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the child, I'm the adult, and I'm the narrator in the series of books, but it's written in third person because I am so different than how I was when I was 12 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
And to go back to that time, to like force myself to go back to that time and remember what it was like to be 12 and 13 and 14 and 15 and having all of these events happening in my life as I am maturing, was a very interesting process. I've not written anything in third person since. Everything is like directly from me to my reader in my books. But the trilogy is different because it was having to rediscover what was so enchanting and mesmerizing and mind-blowing about living at the farm. So anyway, I just wanted to say that because you just precisely described the whole process that it took for me to tell that story the way I thought it should be told.
Yeah. Because, we all have reasons to want to disavow the wonderfully amazing experience of childhood. We have reasons to want to. And that's that season of disenchantment. And but there comes a point, I think, where you have to choose whether you're going to be honest with yourself and own your own history. And that includes owning the reality of just what it was to be constantly awestruck as a child, whether you had experiences like those you had or those I had, maybe in a more miniature form or not, because I went through a similar experience. I grew up in a house for 13 years where, haunted is the best word still I have to describe it. And I'm sure there are better terms, but for me, it carries all of the feelings and vibes I'm trying to express when I talk about it. not necessarily haunted in a spooky Halloween sense, but haunted in the sense that there was always something there. And sometimes it stepped through and made itself known, and at other times it did not. And in fact, just like 4 or 5 years ago, after having not, I mean, I'm 41 now. So this would have been, I was like 37 or 38. We moved out of that house when I was 13. But when I was writing the book that I'm working on now, that includes stories about my growing up years in that house that are tied specifically to what we're talking to tonight, I actually called the present owners of the house just to see if they had similar experiences. And he was like, I talked up, and the kids were like, "Are you kidding me?" They were like, "We thought we were insane all of these years." I mean, literally experiences happened in that house that tore the family apart, and they were just like, "I cannot believe you're telling me this." Like, but it gave them so much peace and comfort to know they weren't crazy. So, I mean, was touched by something very real as a child, something very real, left a mark on me. And when I went through a season of, well, even my Christianity was kind of a sense of rebellion against it, because I categorized it as demonic, put it over here, where all the dark stuff goes. And that's nothing that can be a part of my present life or experience. And then I went through an experience as an atheist where I disavowed all things supernatural, those that I considered dark and those that I considered light. And then I came to this place of coincidentio oppositorum, and uniting those opposites, both of belief and unbelief, and what I thought dark and what I thought light, and accepted the things that happened to me as a child. And it all came together in this glorious whole. And I'm now living in that state of second naivete where the world is wonderful and amazing to me again, and it doesn't all have to just be simply dark, light, angels, demons, and all that kind of unearned and undeserved simplicity that we speak of things in terms of before experience is really ours, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, so it was a long way of saying, what were we talking about? Numbers, right?
Yeah.
But we were talking about the number phenomenon. But once you get to that, there's a point you get to in life where you reopen yourself up to wonder. And the universe, God, spirit, all of those words, and whatever they represent, whatever is looming behind those letters, will begin to present itself to you and make itself known. And when you decide that a certain language is one that you can be spoken to in, and
oh no, we lost Jeff. Bill, see if you can get him to hop out and hop back in, because he's frozen solid. At least on my screen, he's frozen solid. We haven't had that happen in a long time. So anyway, all right. So Jeff will come back in. He'll join us back again in a moment. My shirt's too big. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be, not so shameless. So anyway, what's been happening as we get Jeff back and he can pick up where I leave off, what's been happening is very strange, and sequenced numbers have been coming to us, both of us, at least several times a day for weeks and weeks now. And a lot of them have been the same numbers, 444. But others as well. 1111 makes its presence known literally daily, whether it's on the stove or the coffee machine, or, and it's not that we're seeking it out. It's just all of a sudden, it's almost like it's speaking to us. It says, look at the clock, or look at your phone, or, it's just the strangest thing that's been happening. That neither of us remember happening in the past, not with such frequency anyway. So, we've kind of been exploring this as it's been happening, and we'll text each other, talk during the week, make contact about this when it occurs. And what my hypothesis, anyway, at least what I threw out to him, was the notion that perhaps, just perhaps, numbers have their own kind of consciousness, that they are a part of consciousness. And we've all heard our whole lives that mathematics is the language of the universal language, that any race would be able to communicate with us through numbers. And I learned that in grade school science. There you are. I hope he's back. Are you there, honey? There you are.
I'm here. Yep.
I don't know what happened, but suddenly you froze all up like the frozen tundra guy that you are.
Yeah, it went out in the whole house there for a minute. I'm not
Did
sure
it?
why. So, yep. But
Okay.
we're back for now.
Okay. So, anyway, in your absence, I told everyone that we've been having, and what we've talked about on previous shows, at least a couple who have made mention of the fact that we're having these almost like outbursts of sequential numbers coming at us literally every day.
Yeah.
And showing up, in our busy lives when we're going about our normal business. All of a sudden, something says stop and look at your phone, look at the stove, look at the coffee machine, look at the thing on the TV, and there it is. It's 11:11, it's 4:44, it's 5:55, it's 2:22. Over and over. And I was letting them know that we had discussed at least my hypothesis. At least I think there's a plausibility that somehow numbers factor into consciousness as a whole.
Yeah.
Not even that they have their own consciousness, but ever since grade school, I have been taught that mathematics is the universal language, that any race that had gotten sophisticated enough to have language would also have mathematics, would also have a way to communicate with us. And I was wondering, and I'll finish my thought now that you're back, was wondering if this is perhaps a way that other races are trying to communicate with us, or even a singular race is trying to communicate with us. And at least for me, it works, because whenever I find it's very interesting, Jeff, whenever all of a sudden I'll look down at my phone, stop what I'm doing and look at my phone, and it's 444.
Yeah.
And for the length of time that I stand there and stare at those numbers, it's a full minute. So something's triggering in my mind to stop and look at the phone. And from literally the second that it turns to the sequence of numbers for the duration of that minute. And one of the things that I've learned.
I'm listening. I'm going to grab a book real quick while you're talking.
One of the things that I've learned. Oh, Cody's with us. Oh, God, I love you so much. You're so wonderful, honey. Thank you. We love you very much. One of the things that I have learned, Jeff, is how long a minute is. That's that sequence of time.
Yeah.
Which is considered, minute, no pun intended.
Yeah, right.
And that we blow through every day, 1,000 minutes a day, just blow through them doing this and that and the other thing. But when I pause, when I see the numbers, I pause and I watch them. And inevitably, it's for like the whole minute, or maybe just a few seconds short of the whole minute. And what it has done, it has caused me to be more mindful, to feel more connected, and to comprehend that segment of time in a different way, that measurement of time, and how incredibly long a minute is, and how much thought and feeling and communication you can cram into a mere 60 seconds.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. And that's one of my favorite principles. And I extract it from scripture, but it's present in all sorts of mythologies. But there's a great verse in the Psalter, in the Jewish Psalter, Psalm 84:10, that says, "Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere." And the way that I've always interpreted that is that one day in the presence of the divine. One day, one moment when you're consciously interfacing with the beyond and the other is better than 1,000 elsewhere. Just simply meaning that, it's like Blake said that, to see infinity in a grain of sand, eternity in an hour.
Yes.
That and as somebody whose name will come to me in a moment said, Huxley said that if the doors of perception were cleansed, yes, if the doors of perception were cleansed, we would see everything as it was, infinite, right? So each moment does contain an eternity. It's just that we're rarely mindful of it. And so when things like this occur, sometimes it may even just be calling us to stand and be still and know that we are in the presence of that which is divine, right? I mean, Moses has the experience where he encounters a bush that is burning but is not consumed, right? That's a moment of time being turned back on itself, because he's encountering a bush that's dry enough to ignite. So this bush is already being overwhelmed by entropy. But not only is it dry enough to ignite, it's burning, right? But it's burning, but it's not consumed. And that's because that which is touched by entropy was being touched by eternity. And so there was sort of this stasis that was reached where eternity wasn't moving forward and entropy wasn't pushing it backwards, and it was just perfectly still. And there's those moments in time where we become mindful of eternity and everything just stops. And when God speaks to Moses from that arboreal apparition, he says, his name is I am, because that's the calling. That's what we're called to remember and to become mindful of in moments like that. The I amness of everything. Not I will, not I was, not I will be, not I do, but I am. To just be in the blessed, sacred isness of eternity in the now. And, another thing that I was thinking when we talk about these communications through numbers, it reminds me of the concept of logos, right? Logos, according to Heraclitus, it's essentially the pre-Socratic philosopher. Logos is the ordering principle of the universe, right? It's that which orders the chaos of the universe. And so just over the last few weeks, I mean, I've been being spoken to through numbers for years and years and years.
Yeah. But not like this.
No. It's picked up, and it's been really, really strangely on point. Like some of our texts back and forth this week, which will just stay between us, but we're like just goddamn bizarre. Like I was just like, holy crap, could this get any weirder? I was like, I feel like I'm in the Da Vinci Code, like it's like, what in the world? What secret sigil is hidden where now? I mean, it's nuts. But one of the things that makes me think of, though, is okay. So there's chaos and order, and those are the two primeval principles that all myths begin with, right? At the beginning, there's primeval chaos, and then there's an ordering principle, and one by itself is never good, right?
Right.
One by itself is never good. They have to come together in that alchemical coincidentia oppositorum, which means the coincidence of opposites, two things that don't seem like they should go together. It's the alchemical marriage.
Yeah.
It's all of that. And it's what Jung said when he said, in all chaos, there's a cosmos, and all disorder, a secret order. So myths began with chaos and order. And, like in the Mesopotamian epic of the Enuma Elish, there's a war between chaos and order, and order overcomes chaos through violence by cutting it in half and creating the world with its top and bottom, parts of its body that it's been ripped in half. I mean, it's a violent establishment of order. The Hebrew scriptures subvert that and simply have God speaking into what in Hebrew is called the tohu vabohu, which means chaos, basically. And God simply calls out of the chaos order, and he orders it through directed thought and intention, and causes the chaos to come together into a form of order. Anyways, the principle is simply this. Divine communication is everywhere. I really believe that. Like radio signals, like AM, FM, Wi-Fi, it's everywhere. But there has to be a receiver, and that's the logos. The logos is the thing that takes the chaos of all the signals, captures it, focuses it, and allows us to be communicated with by it. And so it made me think of the I Ching. And I've been kind of just experimenting with the I Ching for years. The I Ching is probably one of the oldest forms of, one of the oldest divinatory tools we have. It goes back potentially 5,000 years.
5,000 years, yeah.
And I mean, I have a journal just full of just different experimentations with the I Ching, doing the different hexagrams and all of that. But basically how it works is this: there's 63 hexagrams. And by hexagram, I don't mean the Jewish, what we now call the Star of David, or right. I'm sorry, 64 hexagrams. But I'm not talking about the Star of David hexagram. That's what most people think of. It just means a shape that's comprised of 6 lines. And so you, in the I Ching, you would traditionally cast what's called a Yara stick, but a lot of modern practices involve coins. So you throw coins, right? And that's kind of a chaotic thing. It's random, right? You got a heads and a tails, and you've got that multiplied by however many you're throwing. And it's kind of chaos because it's random, seemingly. But there is a book comprised of 64 hexagrams, right? And so basically how it works is you cast the coin 6 times, you add up the numbers. It's a long process. I won't go into it. And then you draw the hexagram, which is a line or a broken line or a line or a broken line, whatever. And you come up with a 6-line shape. And it corresponds with one of the 64 hexagrams in the I Ching that then basically is kind of meant to give you a snapshot of where you are in reality in that moment. And I'm telling you, it's always bizarrely accurate when I've done it. Just, I'm a religious experimenter. I'm a spiritual pilgrim. I love messing with that stuff. Not messing with it. It's sacred to me, but I love diving into that stuff. And it's always been bizarrely on point. I mean, bizarrely on point. And it shouldn't be bizarre, but it always feels bizarre when you come face to face with the numinous. But the principle is this: there's the chaos of the casting of the coins, which is random, but then there's an ordering principle, right? There's an ordering principle of these 64 hexagrams. So that principle meets with the randomness of the casting of the coins, and it allows communication to come forth. And we talked about Cody and Satori and their method and the gift that they have.
Yes.
And that to me is similar. It's similar. And I've been meditating on their method a lot too, and the power of it. And even their names, Satori in Zen Buddhism means essentially a sudden enlightenment, right? So that's just unbounded, unfettered, revelatory flow, right?
It's a perpetual epiphany.
Yes.
Yes.
In like Lurianic Kabbalah.
That.
Yes. And in Kabbalah, that would be the principle of Hesed in the Tree of Life, which means flow, right? But then flow by itself can be overwhelming. So there has to be an ordering principle that can take that flow, the sudden download, just the boom, everything everywhere all at once, focus it, and it can be effective. So it's not just like you're hearing everything at the same time, but it can focus it so something clear can come through. So Satori, it's even in their names because the universe is symbolic. It's all symbolic. Everything's telling us a story all the time. Yes. So the name Satori, sudden enlightenment. Cody, which basically means helper. So there's one who kind of comes along, and I'm not necessarily saying one is this and one is the other, but it's the coming together of their giftings that manifest.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's not chaos in a bad way, because chaos is not bad in mythology. It just is bad to us. Yeah, it just is. Right. It's boom, it's there. But then there's the ordering principle that takes it, and that's, I think, the magic of why when they join hands, it happens the way that it happens, because those two principles come together. The randomness, just the flow, comes together with the logo, so the ordering principle, and what comes forth is divine communication, supernatural communication. In Kabbalah, you guys all know the Kabbalistic Tree of Life symbol.
Yes.
Hesed means divine flow. It means, again, just all of God coming at you like a freight train, like a Mack truck. But that Hesed is filtered through a principle called Gevura. And Gevura means, it's basically a limitation, but not limitation in a bad way. It's a limitation that liberates. It's a constraint that sets free. It's like a guitar. I play guitar. So if you just strum E-A-D-G-B-E, it's not harmonious. You can't write a song like that. So you have to play a chord, which means you have to limit the oscillation of the strings. It's a limitation, but it's a limitation that liberates the instrument to do what it's meant to do. So there's flow, that's E-A-D-G-B-E, open. It's just everything everywhere all at once. There's the applied limitation of Gevura. And then it also passes through what's called Tiferet, which then is like, okay, now you got the guitar, you know how to play it, you're playing the chord. Now you got to know the context you're playing the guitar in, so you know you're playing the right stuff. So if you're playing at like an old folks home, you probably don't want to be playing Swedish death metal. But if you're at a Swedish death metal festival, you probably want to be playing exactly that. So those principles, there's the flow, and then there's the ordering principle. Comes together, boom, and it's clear, right? Using a lot of hand motions tonight. But I've seen that symbol in them lately, and I think even the rise in consciousness surrounding what they do is important right now, because there's a principle on display there in what they do. Because it's not necessarily just about two people, but it's even about our own selves, right? We have the chaotic part of us, the part that just receives the flow, receives the download, right? But then there also has to be that ordering principle where we take on a kind of logos. So like for some people, that might look like like more traditional religion, and there's nothing wrong with that. That works for people.
Like that. No,
nothing whatsoever. I still live under the banner of the Christ. That is, to me, for whatever reason, that's just what I jive with. That's what I resonate with. For other people, whatever. It's going to be something else. Maybe Western esotericism, maybe Catholicism, maybe Kabbalah, whatever. But there's some logo you get underneath that serves as a principle that takes all the quote unquote chaotic potential of all of this stuff that's going on constantly, and it just helps you focus it. And so something clear and divine comes through. Numbers are the same way, and so that's kind of the principle there is like, there's the randomness of the numbers coming at you all the time. My computer screen is full of tons of numbers right now, all kinds of different stuff. There's the timer on the top, there's the clock up there.
But there's a difference, though. I mean, it's almost numerology, which so many people study and believe in, and seem to have a very clear system that they operate under, very much like doing astrological charts. There's a process. But, like atheistic existentialism is also a belief system.
Absolutely.
It is. It's a belief that we only have the moment, we only live in the moment, and there is no God. Okay. So, and chaos and whatever order around it, freedom versus, determination, free will versus determination, on cause and effect, immutable law of the universe. I mean, we can each name right off the top of our heads 6 philosophers that spent their entire careers wrestling with just these concepts, right? Mathematics is different. It doesn't have any agenda. There's no belief system attached to it.
Right.
It is pure in its application. It is even-handed in its communication. There's nothing that it's built upon or anything that is built upon it. So in that respect, I think mathematics stands alone in terms of the potential for communication through, look at every computer. All binary code, all, everything technologically that exists in our world now is built on a foundation of mathematics. But what if it's talking to us? That's what I'm so fascinated by. The notion that these numbers are not random, that there is pertinence, that there is a message, that there is that moment, that minute where we stop, we pause, we reflect, we become mindful, we connect, and we communicate. Maybe there is an element of communication in there that we have yet to identify. And that's what I find most fascinating about this.
No, and I absolutely think you're 100% correct. And I guess it's kind of what I'm getting at is that it's a system that exists. It's there. It's a language. It's a code. It's there. And if you open yourself up to the possibility that, one, there is a consciousness that desires to communicate with you, and two, that this is a way in which it can happen, well, that's an ordering principle right there. And immediately, when you take that on, and immediately, I don't mean right now, although it might be. But it might be. But like almost immediately, relative to your your life, you will begin to experience phenomenon like that, where numbers come together in strange patterns and present themselves to you. It will, I promise you, it will happen. Because if I'm somewhere where I don't know the language, right? And they don't know my language, I don't know theirs, but we come up with some kind of code. When I knock 3 times, it means this. When I whistle, it means that. I don't know. I'm making stuff up. If I click my tongue, I'm asking for this. If I whatever, we will quickly develop a language all of our own, where we will learn to communicate with one another. But we have to be open to the possibility. Okay, when he does this, this means that. And you know what? Some people will say, I see it all the time, I just don't know what it means. Well, you know what? Sometimes it means what you want it to mean. And I don't mean that you read. Because for me, different numbers mean different things. And they'll mean something for me they don't mean for other people, right? So for me, the numbers 1111 always speak about some kind of awakening.
Yeah.
And to me, that's tied to John 11:11. Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go that he may awaken. And I've had that come to me in so many different ways over the years that that's what the number always seems to mean to me. And so when I see it, it wakes me up. It zings me. It's like, whew, there's something that happens and it speaks of some kind of awakening coming. 444 for me means one thing. 333 for me means one thing. For me, even like if it appears in a single digit, I have the mindset of it's a promise. If it appears twice, it means it's on its way. The promise is on its way. If it appears in 3, it means you're standing in it now. Receive it, take it in, and move in it. So, but that's kind of like a language and a code that I've developed on my own, but it works because what is trying to communicate with us, it loves us, it wants us to understand, and it will acquiesce. It will get down and play with us like children, right? It will, like the way that you will get down and watch a show with your children that might not be your favorite show, but you will watch. For me, I grew up in Dora the Explorer age, and I would sit there and watch Dora the Explorer all day long if it meant I could be with my kids. And I ended up liking the dumb show. I miss it sometimes. And but it's like wouldn't have been my first choice. But then it's like, but this is how we communicate. This is how we connect. And so it is with divine consciousness. It will speak to you in whatever language you choose to be spoken to in. And numbers, it's just one way, And I think the thing about it that's so beautiful, as I was thinking about it this week, and we talked about it a little last week too, about how the digital clock on your stove can be a call onto a hero's journey that will change the entire course of your life and untold thousands of others possibly. And it's like, it's the Narnian wardrobe. You know what I mean? It's the common thing. It's the wardrobe full of fur coats that you would have possibly walked past, in a world of 21st century minimalism, maybe a World War II or prior era wardrobe would be a wonder to behold. But in the context of Lewis's line, Witch in the Wardrobe, it was meant to represent a commonplace object. But that becomes a gateway into a whole new world that changes your destiny and the destiny of the universe, right? And so it's like, when you begin to see the world like that, and I guess that's even what we mean in the description about the depth of the surface, that a surface level thing, like the numbers on a clock, right? Like the numbers on the digital clock on your stove can be that Narnian wardrobe that you walk through into a whole new world that changes your life. If you're listening, if you're mindful, if you open yourself up to the possibility that there is a consciousness attempting to communicate with you, this consciousness loves you. It wants you to understand it. It wants to speak to you. And so if you open yourself up to that possibility and you put forth the idea that numbers are one way that can happen, those numbers will begin to present themselves to you and you will figure out the code of what it means. Just this week we had, stuff pop up and we were going back and forth talking about it. And I was Googling things and it was like, I was even looking in realms that I don't normally look in. And it was so spot on that I was like, this is just, it was so spot on. It was bizarre, and everything about my life is typically bizarre.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, gotcha.
But it was just so nail on the head. Sometimes you got to go like 3 layers before you find the meaningful thing. But this one was just like every time, boom, boom, boom. And it spoke perfectly to the situation. And, you can live being led like that. You can, if you open yourself up to the possibility. And, but I guess that's what I was saying. What I meant by all the order chaos talk before is that the ordering principle is opening yourself up to the fact that this is a language, that there is a consciousness that wants to communicate. There is a language there. You can even come up with your own meanings, I think, or, there's all kinds of different ways. Some people like the angel number route. I tend to like look in scripture because the numbers just line up so perfectly sometimes.
Respond.
Yep. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can receive that communication. But opening yourself up to the possibility of it is absolutely key. And I promise you it will happen. And it's all there. It's all this chaotic potential. I'm looking at a clock here. I'm looking at a clock there. Got a clock behind me. There's numbers everywhere. And that can just be chaos, just floating out there, meaningless. But when I open myself up to the possibility that there is a language that can come through that to me, that could possibly change my life for the better, well, then the mundane becomes the Narnian wardrobe, right? The mundane, the surface becomes the deepest place when I open myself up to that possibility.
Well, it's Alice in the Looking Glass. It's part of the re-enchantment.
Yeah.
It's part of, coming into a fuller understanding and that point in life where we are beginning to attain wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that has anything to do with arriving at any particular age.
No.
It's an ongoing process, throughout our lives. I think wisdom is attained more by our ability to assimilate the experiences of our life, not to compartmentalize them as much as to absorb them and dissect them slowly. Give them a chance to settle in our minds. And in some cases, memories that are so profound and significant and powerful that they speak to each other. They speak to, this all happened at this place, the house that you grew up in, the house that I grew up in. And now in reflection and retrospect, this event had a profound connection to that event.
Yeah.
It all happened under the, the grand umbrella of home where we grew up. But there is a correlation and an integration which exists in all of our vast experiences of life, no matter what they are, whether they're quote unquote normal or paranormal or both, and both. And I think that the wisdom that we attain comes in the mindful reflection on the experiences that we've had. And in order to attain that understanding in the moment, it is a necessary element of the examination to revisit the past, not dwell there, but revisit it and look at it as, our old reality with new eyes. To look at it a different way, because we now perceive the world differently than we did as a child. Who was it that says, when I was a child, gosh, oh my God, I should know this right off the top of my head. When I was a child, I
thought as a child, I spoke as a child.
Yes. Right. And right.
The Apostle Paul. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So say it. Have you got it memorized?
It's essentially that. It's like when I was a child, I spoke as a child, acted as a child, behaved as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. And it's said in the context of, essentially overcoming an obsessive search for meaning and coming into a place where you're abiding in love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And then when you do that, the whole world is enchanted, and that's it. When you hit that, the whole world is just simply enchanted. I was thinking this week a lot about I've been reading the poetry of Gerard Manley Hopkins again a lot lately, the Jesuit, a priest and poet. And in his poetry, I especially love As Kingfishers Catch Fire, that nature is a Heraclitean fire. Beautiful, beautiful poem. But in Kingfishers specifically, he talks about, well, he lays out what's called, in his thinking, inscape and in-stress. And these are terms he made up.
Mm-hmm.
And inscape is his idea that everything has this core essence, right? And what it does is what it is. That what anyone does is what they are at the core of their being, which is kind of a fractal concept. And then in stress is the encounter with the inscape. And actually, could I read the Kingfisher's poem real
Yes,
quick?
please. Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. Hold on.
Yeah, I think we have
Yep. A few minutes.
about 5-6 minutes. Yep.
Okay. It's very short. But as kingfishers catch fire, he says, as kingfishers, a bird with very colorful plumage, as kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame. As tumbled over rim in roundy wells, stones ring, like each tucked string tells, each hung bells. Bow swung finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same. Deals out that being indoors, each one dwells. Selves goes itself, myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. I say more, the just man justices, keeps grace, that keeps all his goings graces, acts in God's eyes what in God's eyes he is, Christ. For Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his, to the Father through the features of men's faces. It's gorgeous.
Yes.
But his idea that's on display there is the idea of inscape. And he's describing nature and all of its beauty and what the thing is on the inside, shining forth. The plumage of the kingfisher, the bright plumage, is a result of what it is in here. He says the just man justices. Like he uses justices as a verb. Justice is what the just man does because that's who he is. And then he distills it all down and says, here's what's really going on. At the heart of everything is this Christ principle. Call it what you will. He's a Jesuit priest, so he calls it Christ. He's like, at the core of everything is Christ. And Christ is in the faces and in the visage of everyone and everything. And so that's the inscape, the inner world, the inner landscape. It's all this divine thing, right? And everything has this. At the core of everything is this divine dance, right?
Yeah.
But the in stress in his thinking is the experience of that thing. So everything is that. It's just the in stress is when you experience it, right? And so the whole world is enchanted. At the center of everything is a divine flame that burns. It's there. You know, we might not all have experiences like those you and I had growing up where it's obvious and on display, right? I mean, we're blessed and we're lucky, and we're also
So
in some way, you know, and I didn't always think that way. But I think in some ways it gives you a little bit of like it's kind of like the moving walkway. You know, you just zip ahead a little bit to where you're like, oh, I don't really have to. I've had experiences that other people seek out their whole lives that I didn't ask for, you know, and it's a different whatever. But so not everybody has that, but still the whole world is, for lack of a better term, haunted by divine beauty and love. It's everywhere.
yeah.
It's at the center of everything, the inscape of everything. But it's the in stress, it's the experience of it that we're all after. And that experience comes through, it's so simple. It's so simple. It's openness. The individual who wrote the Epistle of James, who is likely not the Apostle James, said, draw near to God, God will draw near to you. It's really as simple as that.
Yeah.
The divine, the supernatural, whatever it is, posture yourself towards it. Open yourself to it. It will present itself. It will. It absolutely will. You will.
Well, I would argue that it can't help but be so because of the immutable law of attraction.
Mhm.
But unless, you know, that law in its existence, you know, its universal existence,
Yeah.
cannot function optimally or optimally unless we're willing to meet it, you know, unless we're willing to to go there, you
Yeah.
know, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically,
Mhm.
unless we're willing to make that connection
Yeah.
and feel it. And it doesn't mean I think that the connection exists no matter what. That's
Absolutely.
a given. It, you know, the watch and the watchmaker, you know, it's all one thing. It's
Yeah.
all one presence and existence and consciousness and action and divine mind and pure spirit. Um, it's our choice
Yes.
whether or not to live obliviously to it or to tap into it and to avail
Mhm.
ourselves
Yeah.
of that higher energy, that higher divine consciousness, that
Yes.
where we connect with all things, feel all things, and become re-enchanted with
Mhm.
our own existence
Yes.
via that direct, unique pathway to an already existing attachment that we have to acknowledge before we can really benefit from it.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. It's kind of like the knocking is always happening. But when
Yeah,
the two
yeah,
principles come together, you
yeah,
know, it presents itself,
yeah.
right?
It manifests in its fullest, most
Yep.
beautiful blossoming.
The potential for frost on your window is always in the air. The potential for dew on the grass is always in the air. But when the temperature drops or hits a certain point, it condenses and it manifests itself. Spirit is everywhere, right? I mean, the Apostle Paul, quoting the poet Epimenides, says that in him we live and move and have our being. Can't
Mhm.
help but live and move and have your being in the divine. You're swimming in it, you are submerged in it. But at certain temperatures, and I think that certain temperature is acknowledgement, observation, posturing yourself, it can't help but manifest in your life.
Well, you know, getting back to an earlier point, Bill just told us we have 1 minute left and we are into that last minute. And look how amazing 1
Mhm.
minute can be
Yeah.
and how what you can cram into 1 minute of time
Mm.
can literally change the way that someone thinks, feels, believes, lives their life in a more meaningful way. And
Yeah.
I hope that tonight's show has touched everyone in that way.
Mhm.
So thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll probably just pick up where we left off next week. And we love you all. Have a blessed and beautiful week. And for tonight, class is dismissed.
Good night.
Good night.